My fiancé's mother looked me up and down in front of all their wealthy friends and said, "You will never be one of us." And you know what? She was right. A year later, I was back in that same ballroom on the arm of her husband's biggest rival. And I was about to own everything she held dear. The silence that hit after she said that was deafening. 300 pairs of eyes, all belonging to the city's elite, just staring at me. My dress, which I'd felt so beautiful in just moments before, suddenly felt like a cheap Halloween costume. My fiancé, Mark, was standing right there beside me. His hand was kind of in mine, but his face was just blank. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look at her. He just stood there while his mother, Eleanor Preston, torpedoed my entire life with one sentence. Before I get into how I tore down the family that tried to break me, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You're not going to want to miss the end of this story. It all started the way you'd expect. I fell in love. I met Mark Preston at a local art fair where I was selling my digital prints a little business. I'd built myself with nothing but a laptop and a serious lack of sleep. Mark was charming, handsome, and he didn't seem to care at all that my bank account wasn't like his. He said he admired my drive, that I was a breath of fresh air compared to the trust fund princesses he grew up with. For a year, it was a total fairy tale. I was head over heels, and I really thought he was too. Then came the family. The Prestons were old money, the kind that smells like judgment and mothballs. His dad, Richard, was a cutthroat real estate mogul who looked at me like I was a rounding error on a balance sheet. But his mother, Eleanor, she was the real master of the backhanded compliment. She'd ask about my little online shop with this sickly sweet smile, or say how brave I was to wear something from a department store to their country club. I tried so hard to ignore it. I told myself my relationship was with Mark, not his parents. I loved him, and I thought he loved me enough to be a buffer. When he proposed, I figured the ring on my finger would be a shield. God, I was so wrong. It was a target. The public execution happened at the Prestons' annual charity gala. It was this huge, over-the-top party in the fanciest hotel ballroom in the city. To make matters worse, Eleanor had told everyone it was also going to be our engagement party. I'd spent a month's rent on a dress because I was so desperate to just fit in, to prove I wasn't the charity case she thought I was. The whole night was a slow-motion car crash. Richard Preston flat out ignored me, literally turning his back anytime I tried to speak to him. And Mark, who was usually so attentive, was a ghost. His parents kept pulling him away to greet this person or that, and I just stood there, alone. An awkward planet in an orbit I couldn't break into. The big moment came right after dinner. Eleanor gathered her little coven of influential friends who were all looking at me with this mix of pity and morbid curiosity. And Mark was standing right there. "Eleanor, your future daughter-in-law is just lovely," one of the women said, her eyes doing a full price check on my dress. Eleanor let out this short, sharp laugh, like glass shattering. "Oh, let's not get ahead of ourselves, darling," she said, loud enough for half the room to hear. She turned those cold blue eyes on me and did this slow, deliberate scan from my shoes to my hair, designed to just gut me. Mark has his little projects. It's a phase. The air got so thick, I could feel my face burning. I looked at Mark, begging him with my eyes to just do something. He just stared at the floor. Eleanor leaned in, dropping her voice to a whisper that everyone could still hear. "She's a sweet girl, I suppose, but a Preston? Our family has a legacy to protect. You need the right." Background. Then came the final shot. She stood up straight, smiled at the silent, watching crowd, and announced, "You will never be one of us." That silence was the thing that broke me. It was a verdict. She was the judge, and every single person in that room was the jury. And I was guilty of not being good enough. I pulled my hand out of Mark's. His head snapped up, and I saw a flash of panic in his eyes, but it was way too late. I didn't say a word. I just turned and walked, right out of the ballroom, past the smirking valets, and into the cold. The engagement was over. My heart was in pieces. My humiliation was complete. I felt like nothing. But as I stood there on that sidewalk, something else started burning under the pain. Pure rage. They thought they'd thrown me out. They had no idea they'd just set me free. The first few weeks were a sad, pathetic blur. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see Eleanor's smug face and Mark's total, spineless inaction. They'd made me feel so worthless, like trash they'd just tossed on the curb. And for a while, I almost believed them. I stopped creating, I dodged calls from my friends, and just kind of wallowed. But that fire inside me, the one that got me to start a business from scratch, it wasn't out, and slowly, that little ember of rage started to glow. I was done crying. I was going to get even. The only question was how. I was a small-time artist with a laptop. They were an empire. I started where I was comfortable. I did my research. I channeled all the energy I'd been wasting on being sad into learning everything I could about the Prestons' financial reports, society pages, old news articles, you name it. I wanted to find a weakness, and that's when I found him, Alistair Vance. Alistair Vance was basically a myth in the business world. He was a self-made billionaire, even richer and more private than the Prestons, and he was their sworn enemy. Turns out, a decade ago, Richard Preston had screwed Alistair over in a huge development deal, a betrayal that almost ruined him. But Alistair didn't just survive. He came back with a vengeance, building an empire that made the Prestons look like amateurs and systematically crushing their business ever since. Richard Preston hated Alistair Vance with the fire of 1,000 suns. And that's when a crazy, terrifying plan started to form. What would hurt the Prestons, a family obsessed with image and power, more than anything else? Seeing the girl they threw away on the arm of the one man they truly feared. The enemy of my enemy, right? Or in this case, my secret weapon. Getting to a guy like Alistair Vance wasn't going to be easy. He was a total recluse. But my obsessive research gave me an in. He was a huge collector of contemporary digital art. My kind of art. I found out he was attending a private, high-stakes art auction. The ticket alone cost more than I made in half a year, but I drained my savings and bought one. This was my one shot. I wasn't going to go throw myself at him. My plan was way more subtle. I was going to make him come to me. At the auction, I found a piece by an obscure artist I knew Alistair wanted. When he walked over, I was already there, studying it. "It's a bold choice," I said, not even looking at him. "The artist's use of algorithmic decay is brilliant, but most collectors are too scared to see past the novelty." He turned, and I saw him up close for the first time. He was older, with sharp, intelligent eyes that didn't miss a thing. He was way more intimidating than Richard Preston's loud, obnoxious energy. "You're the first person here who hasn't mentioned the price," he said, his voice a low baritone. "You actually see the art." We talked for 20 minutes about art, about tech, about how soulless it was to collect for status instead of passion. I never mentioned the Prestons. I didn't have to. I was just an intelligent woman who saw the world in a way that interested him. When he walked away, I thought my gamble had failed. But just before the auction ended, his assistant handed me a card. "Mr. Vance would be delighted if you would join him for dinner tomorrow." That dinner led to another and another. Alistair was nothing like the monster the papers made him out to be. He was brilliant and demanding, sure, but also funny and surprisingly down-to-earth. He actually listened to me in a way Mark never had. He was fascinated by my work, my ambition. He saw my background not as a weakness, but as a strength. I was careful. My heart was still one big bruise from Mark, and I kept telling myself this was all about revenge. But the more time I spent with Alistair, the more that line started to blur. He saw me. He made me feel powerful. Then one night, over dinner at his penthouse, he finally laid it all out. "I know who you are," he said calmly. "I know you were engaged to Mark Preston." My heart just stopped. "Alistair, He held up a hand. "I also know what his mother did to you. I make it my business to know everything about Richard Preston and his pathetic family." He looked right at me. "The question is, what do you want to do about it?" It was a test. He was showing me his cards and asking for mine. I took a deep breath. "I want them to feel what I felt," I said, my voice shaking just a little. "Helpless, humiliated. I want to take away the one thing they care about, their status." A slow smile spread across Alistair's face. "Good," he said, "because Richard Preston owes me. And I think it's time we collected." And just like that, our alliance was sealed. It wasn't just about dating anymore. It was a strategic partnership. He started teaching me about his world finance, leverage, how to play the game. He saw the business mind behind my art and invested in it. In return, I gave him the inside scoop on the Preston social world, their egos, their weaknesses. We were a team. I was no longer the girl who got cast out. I was being remade in the fire of my own revenge, and I was about to burn their entire world to the ground. A year to the day after my public humiliation, it was time for the same annual charity gala. The invitation arrived, thick and creamy, addressed to Alistair Vance and guest. When Alistair gave it to me, all he said was, "Ready?" I was. That year with Alistair had changed me. It wasn't just the designer clothes or the confidence that comes from having a billionaire on your side. He'd invested in my business, giving me the capital and connections to expand it beyond my wildest dreams. My little online shop was now a sought-after brand. I wasn't just an artist, I was a businesswoman, a success. I had become someone the Prestons would have to acknowledge, whether they liked it or not. The moment we walked into that ballroom, the whole room went quiet, then erupted in whispers. There I was, on Alistair Vance's arm, in a custom gown that cost more than Mark's car. I could feel every eye on me. The same people who'd watched me crawl out were now watching me fly in. We moved through the room like we owned it. People who wouldn't have given me the time of day a year ago were practically falling over themselves to say hello. And then I saw them. Eleanor's face was a perfect picture of disbelief, her wine glass frozen halfway to her lips. Richard looked like he'd seen a ghost. And Mark, he just stared, his face a mix of shock and something that looked a lot like regret. We didn't go to them, we made them come to us. Alistair was holding court with the city's power players, and I was right there with him. Part of the conversation, not just a decoration. Finally, Eleanor couldn't take it anymore. She marched over, her husband and son shuffling behind her. "Alistair," she said through clenched teeth, "I didn't realize you were coming." Her eyes shot to me. "And you brought her." Alistair gave her a cold, predatory smile. "Eleanor, Richard, and it's Mark, right?" He put his arm around my waist. "Yes, I brought the brilliant and beautiful Miss Evans. We're celebrating." "Celebrating what?" Richard grunted. "Oh, just a little business," Alistair said casually. "I've just closed on the final parcel of land for my new downtown development, the cornerstone of the new financial district." Richard went white. I knew from my research that the Prestons' entire fortune was tied up in their own competing project that was now completely worthless without that exact piece of land. "That's impossible," Richard stammered. "That land wasn't for sale." "Everything's for sale for the right price," Alistair said smoothly. "And I have your former fiancée to thank. Her insights into the city's shifting culture were key in identifying the property. She has a remarkable head for strategy." Eleanor looked at me like I'd just slapped her. The thought that I, the the girl from nowhere had helped outsmart them was more than she could handle. You did this?" she hissed. Before I could answer, Mark stepped forward. "What are you doing with him?" he asked, his voice raw. "He's our enemy." I finally looked him right in the eye, and I felt absolutely nothing. That love I'd had for him was just gone, replaced by cold, hard strength. "He's not my enemy, Mark. He's my partner." Then I turned back to Eleanor, whose perfect mask was finally cracking. She looked me up and down, just like she did a year ago. But this time, I didn't even flinch. I just smiled. "You are right, Eleanor," I said, my voice calm and clear enough for everyone nearby to hear. "I never did become one of you. I let that hang in the air for a second. I became the one who bought you." Her face just crumpled. The humiliation was total, and it was public. Richard looked like he was about to have a stroke. Mark just stood there, completely defeated. We hadn't just taken their money. We took their status, their legacy, and their pride, all in front of the only people whose opinions they cared about. Alistair squeezed my hand. "Shall we, my dear?" he murmured. As we turned to leave, a hand grabbed my arm. It was Mark. "Please," he whispered, his eyes pleading. "Don't do this. I still love you." I pulled my arm away gently. "No, Mark," I said, with no anger, just finality. "You loved the idea of me. You were never willing to fight for me. Alistair was." And with that, I walked away from the ruins of my old life. The fallout for the Prestons was swift and brutal. Their company collapsed and they had to sell off everything. They went from being the talk of the town to a cautionary tale. Mark tried to call a few more times, but I never picked up. That chapter was closed for good. My life, on the other hand, was just getting started. What began as a plot for revenge had turned into something real. Alistair and I weren't just partners in business. We were true equals. He saw my worth when I was at my lowest, and I brought some passion and light back into his guarded life. I learned that the best revenge isn't about destruction. It's about building yourself into something so incredible that your enemies become irrelevant. I didn't need to destroy the Prestons to heal. I needed to build myself up. The revenge was just a very, very satisfying side effect of my own success. I found my power, my voice, and an unexpected love. And that's a victory sweeter than any ruin. If you loved this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. And let me know in the comments, what would you have done?